How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another Microsoft Flight Sim 2020 video. Today we're going over the Dare TBM 930 in Microsoft Flight Sim 2020. This is one of my favorite aircraft to fly. It is, I believe, the only turboprop aircraft, even in the premium version. I'd love to buy one of these in real life, but obviously they cost quite a bit of money, and I'm not quite there yet. I'd have to make friends with a few bankers in order for me to get the money. Hopefully that's in my future, but today we're just doing the startup tutorial. So here's the disclaimer. Again, the booklet is available down in the description on my Google site, but please don't use these as actual training for the aircraft or for pilot training. Those need to be done through a reputable source, someone who is licensed and certified in order to teach you those things. These are for simulation use only, even though they are based on the real thing. So let's go ahead and get started here with the pre-flight inspection checklist by coming up here. We're going to turn on our passenger oxygen and the oxygens as a whole. We're going to check to make sure the exterior lights panel and interior lights panel are all off. The panel lights need to be turned all the way to max brightness though, which they are. The crash lever needs to be down. The starter switch needs to be in the off position, which is in the middle position. The ignition switch is in auto. The auxiliary boost pump is in the off position. Fuel selector switch is on manual, and autopilot trim is on off. Come down here. I'm going to remove the yoke here for now. The AC switch needs to be in off, so we can move that down to the off position. The circuit breaker light off. Our de-ice system needs to be all off, as well as the inertial separator switch needs to be off. The micro mask toggle switch needs to be micro and guarded. That's how it spawns in on the aircraft, so we're fine there. Parking brake needs to be on. Landing gear lever needs to be down, because hopefully the landing gear is down. Then we have the cabin pressure switch, which needs to be norm and guarded, which it is, again, how it spawns in, so we're good there. The bleed needs to be off, which it is already. Hot airflow distributor is as required, whether that's on the windshield or on the pilot, however you want, or whatever you need, as required. So we come down here to the center console. We have the pitch, trim, and neutral takeoff. Manual fuel override is pulled all the way back. Our throttle is in cutoff position. Our fuel tank selector is open in the left or right tank position, and doesn't matter which. In our case, it's the left. Alternate static source selector is pushed in, and that is the normal setting. And then our emergency ram air valve is closed and pushed, which is how it spawns in. So we're good on that. Now we come up to the before engine start checklist. We come up here, we move the crash bar up. We select battery for the source and main for the generator, main being the middle slot there. At this point, this is where we would copy our ATIS and get our start clearance. Then we can come down here to our multi-function display, enable that. Keep an eye on this CAS, the crew alert system. We'll be looking at that quite a bit. And we need to actually, after that task system test, that'll randomly come on that check. But that's all good, so nothing to worry about there. We need to check that the main generator warning and the oxygen warning are not up on our CAS, our crew alert system, and they are not, so we're good. Then we come down here to the interior lights test button. We press and hold this. We'll see all the lights come on in the cabin. Release it and they'll go off. That's just testing to make sure our lights work. The dump switch is norm and guarded, and just like I said, it's spawned in on norm and guarded. The landing gear check down and light check. Ooh, got tongue-tied there. So check down, we press and hold, and it'll flash to make sure the landing gear are down. And then the light test checks, make sure all the lights work. They'll flash slowly if they do. Fuel on board / quantity check here. 73 gallons in each of the fuel tanks, equally balanced. The fuel tank selector, just to check to make sure we're left or right, which is in the left position. Can't really see it with the panel lights being all lit up like that, but it is in the left position. We then come back here to the ITT, which is the residual interstage turbine temperature. This needs to be below 150 to do a normal start, which it is. When it spawns in, it will. The only time it wouldn't be is if you were to shut down the engine and then start it up very shortly after shutting it down. In the real procedures of the real world, you would do a modified start procedure to make sure that you do no damage to the engine. Otherwise, it could damage the engine. So the battery volts will check. We are within the range at 24. The crew alert system, we just, again, are keeping an eye on that. Parking brake, we're going to check to make sure it's still on, which it is, and our parking brake warning is still on as well. It's the top one there. All right, so now we move on to the engine start checklist. So we come up here, flip the strobe lights on. We check to make sure the ignition is in auto, which it is. Auxiliary boost pump can be switched to the on position. And then we come down here to the CAS and make sure that the auxiliary boost pump warning is on, which it is. And the fuel pressure warning has disappeared, so that is good. We do have fuel pressure now. Then we want to come out, zoom out, and check to make sure our propeller area is clear. Besides Mr. Pushback Man over there, we're not going to be using him. Sorry, dude, you're on the clock for no reason. Now, we are going to do the engine start sequence, and this is going to be done in quick succession, so I'm going to explain it beforehand so it's a little more fluid. We're going to come up here, flip the starter switch into the on position. If I bring back the yoke up, we're going to hit the timer button. Sometimes, or almost all the time, the timer doesn't work. I don't know if it's bugged or I'm doing something wrong. But irregardless, we're going to hit the timer button. We would start the timer. And then the starter warning here is just going to let us know that the starter is on. And we don't want the main generator warning to come on, and it usually doesn't. At 13% NG, which is this little number right here, it'll turn white when it's not 0. We will move this lever into the low idle position. And then at 52% NG, when this number will turn green again, we're going to pull it into the high idle, let it sit there for like a fraction of a second, and then move it over into the flight idle, which is this taxi location here. This is the flight side, this is the idle side. We want to get it out of that high idle because otherwise the turbine temperature will get too hot and it would damage the engine. All right, so let's go ahead and start this baby up, shall we? So again, we're going to come up here, turn on the engine starter, hit the timer. There's our starter notification there. Main generator is not showing up, so we're good there. Wait till 13. We're going to hit the low idle. And now we just have to wait till 52% NG. I don't know if I said 50 before, but it's 52 is when it turns to green. It's not something that you need to do right away, but you just want that to be in the green location there on the percent NG. Remember, we're going to park it in the high idle for a short period of time, and then move it over into the flight idle, which we're good. So now we're stabilizing here. I believe it stabilizes at 59, and our ITT is looking good. Everything here is looking good. So we have successfully started the engine. Again, we're going to check to make sure it's 59%. I have 60 in the manual, unless I changed it, but it's right around there. Oil temp and pressure, we're going to check, which I believe, if I can find it again, right here, the pressure's in the green and the temp is in the green. The auxiliary boost pump switch can be moved to auto. The auxiliary boost pump warning should have gone away, which it is. I will address these two flashing warnings here in a second. The fuel tank selector switch can be moved to auto, and that's going to automatically switch between left and right as needed to keep it balanced. And now if we check down here, we're in the left, and this is the shift test. So testing to make sure that it will indeed shift to the other one, which it does. We're going to move it back to the left with another tap of the shift button. We're good there. Autopilot and trim switch can now be flipped on as well. Now we're going to test the generators. So we're going to check to make sure we're on the main generator, which we are. Check the amps and volts right down here. We're at 29 and 44. which those are in the green, so we are good. And now we can check the standby generator, which is the upper position. We check the amps and volts as well, 2944. We're good with that. If not, we would reset the standby, which is the generator reset standby, and then we would check again to make sure it's all good. But we can switch back to the main generator. We can now do what we want with the AC switch, so we're going to go ahead and put that on the pilot because it's pretty hot here in Sedona, I feel like, today. And then the hot airflow distributor, which I'm going to remove the yoke here again. Doesn't really matter. We'll keep it on the windshield for now. Now, this is moving on to the before taxi checklist. The de-ice system wouldn't necessarily be required down in Arizona, unless there's really cold weather down there, of course, obviously, or if we're going up really high. But we need to go through this anyway. So we want to check the propeller de-ice switch is on and illuminated, which it is. The windshield switch on and illuminated, which we're good there. We can now switch both of these off since we will not be needing them today. The airframe de-ice switch we will flip on, and then we need to check to make sure the de-icer boots come on. So this is actually pretty cool that they modeled this, but we have the outside de-icer boots and the inside de-icer boots here will start to come up. And then I think it takes a little bit for this side to end up inflating as well, but we're just going to skip ahead here. You can check and wait for those on your own time. We can turn those off then. And then we flip on the inertial separator, and this protects the engine from any debris going in, whether that's ice or whether that's stuff on the runway. So that's why we turn it on before throttling up the engine, so it doesn't suck something in there that we don't want. The autopilots and trim, we would check and set those. The flaps, we need to check to make sure that they are up, which they are up. Multifunction display, we could configure that however we wanted to. The altimeter here, this does the main one here, this is the one up here. The crew alert system, again, we're keeping an eye on that stuff. This is where we brief the passengers, because this is not a very large passenger aircraft, but it's you can carry passengers on it. The inertia separator warning just came on. That's perfectly fine. That's normal. Just to address that little bing that we heard. Now we can come up and turn on the taxi lights here, and we can flip off our parking brake. And we make sure that the parking brake warning is off, which it is off. And now we can move on to the taxi part of our journey to the skies. We already know the taxi lights are on. We use the throttle as we need. We need to check the brakes and steering, however, as we make our way out to the runway. Now, I think, yes, I want to start on this end. So is what we're going to do here. We're going to avoid Mr. Pushback Man. We're not using him today. We're just going to pretend that he wasn't there. We're going to make our way out to the runway. And I will check back with you guys right before I am about to get to the runway threshold. Alright, so here we are right at the runway threshold here in Sedona. We're going to bring the throttle back to idle. Apply the brakes, and we are going to come down and turn our parking brake on.
Oral warning, okay.
Just check those so they don't beep at us the whole time. Check that the parking brake warning is on, which it is. We can now turn on our landing lights since we've completed the taxi, and we flip on our nav lights as well. We check that our strobe lights are on, which they are. The ignition is auto or on. It's in the auto position. Auxiliary boost pump is in auto, which it is. Fuel tank selection is auto. This is where we can turn on the de-ice if we need it. Let's just do, for good measure, we'll do the airframe, prop, and windshield. And we can also now address the stall no heat and the pitot no heat, left, right. Those need to be switched on, which are right here. The pitot and the pitot right and stall heater. Pitot left, heater, pitot right, and stall heater. So we got those. on, and we check to make sure the inertial separator switch is on, because we are going to be taking off down the runway. We don't want debris going in the engine and ruining our trip. This is where we would adjust the trim if we needed to for takeoff. The flaps can go into the takeoff position. The flight controls we can check. I want to bring up the yoke for this, and we're going to check just to make sure that everything feels good, and it sure does feel good to me, so we are good, or at least as good as I can feel it through my through the simulator stick that I've got. All right, so now we have checked the flight controls. We do the air conditioner controls as we need. The bleed switch is auto or max diff. We're going to move it to the auto position. So that is good there. The fuel quantity and imbalance. Make sure we're in balance as good as we can be. 71, we're balanced. And then we got enough fuel for our trip. The battery amp, warning on the cast, make sure that that is off. That's good. The inertial separator switch, that'll stay on because we have it on. So that's really good. That's good that we don't see anything but the parking brake in that one. The altimeter we would set and check as well, or at very least check here. We're good in this situation. Instrument departure settings we would set and check. The SIDs, the standard instrument departure, we would set if used. Transponder, set check. Flight display settings, set check. Takeoff distances and speeds we would review. Engine instruments we'd check one more time. Everything looks good to me. The prop RPM is just low because we're in idle. Everything else looks good. And yeah, we're good. We can take off the parking brake, and then we can begin our lineup. And I'm going to walk through the normal takeoff checklist while we are on our way out there. So we know our landing lights are on because we just turned those on. We're going to be monitoring the engine instruments as we do all of this. We want all the warnings on the cast to be off except for the inertial separator switch, which we're already good on that. Once we get lined up, we're going to apply the brakes, and we are then going to, once we're ready to take off, increase the throttle until the propeller RPM reaches the green sector on the multifunction display, which is the second gauge from the top on that here. It's currently got the yellow letters right here. The green, I'll show you, I'll zoom in here, take the time. The green is right there, so we want the prop RPM to be maxed. And then we will release the brakes, check to make sure our torque, which is this here, is around 100%, up by this little dash here. And then we will rotate at the speed that we need to. Attitude is 10 degrees up. At positive vertical speed, we are going to tap the brakes and then pull the landing gear up. Make sure that there's no warning with the gear on the cast. And then at greater than 100 knots of airspeed and above 500 feet, we're going to move our flaps to the up position. So let's go ahead, apply the brakes, slowly increase the propeller RPM. Watch those climb. There we go, and now we're up in the green there. We can go ahead and let her rip. There we go. Our torque is up there, slightly over 100%, but that's okay. Go ahead and wait for our rotation speed. I'm going to kind of prolong it a little bit here. Let's go ahead and rotate up. Tap the brakes. Pull up the gear. Alright, we're a little higher than the 10 degrees. We're good there. And now we can move our flaps up because we are above 500 feet AGL. We're going to have the little nose down a little bit right there. But otherwise, we are looking good. Now, if you want to check out the other checklists up to the climb altitude, I'm not going to include them in these videos when we're doing more complicated aircraft. You can check those out down in the booklet, like I said, down below. They're pretty straightforward. It's a lot of just monitoring the aircraft as you're climbing to your intended altitude. There's nothing much really to go over in here. But I do want to thank you for watching and supporting the channel. I'm loving Microsoft Flight Sim. I plan on doing the booklets and videos for every single aircraft in the game. So please stay tuned for more of these and subscribe for future content like this. If there's a certain aircraft you want me to prioritize, please put that down in the comment section below. I always read my comments, I always check them, and I want you guys to have some sort of influence on the content that I'm putting out on the channel. So be sure to leave that down below. And that's all from me. This has been Retz, and I'll see you in the next video.